Welcome to Game Crunch, your weekly video game podcast. My name is Mike Anastasia. With me today we got Brandon.
Hello.
We're here to talk about games and things.
Games and not things.
Games and not things.
Games and not things. Not things today, just games.
No, just games. Probably. All right, what's on the agenda? Mario and Luigi Brothership. I got more updates on that. I don't even know what Dungeon Clawler is. Clawler?
Clawler, yeah.
Okay.
It's neat. I'll
crabs in
tell you about it. Huh?
Mm-hmm. Has it got crabs in it?
Nope.
Okay. That's my best guess. Anyway,
it's crazy. It was a good guess. You tried, but yeah, no. I can talk about that game first. You want me to do that? It sounds
sure,
like
if you want.
That's where we're going. All right, so Dungeon Clawler, which is C-L-A-W-L-E-R, is a dungeon crawler. Who would have guessed? Similar to something like Slay the Spire. It's like a roguelike kind of game, but the way you attack is by playing a crane game.
Okay.
It's very cool. So essentially, the way this game works is you start out with like a certain type of weapon based on what character you pick, and that weapon appears inside the crane machine. And then you have to actually like go and pick up the individual items and get them out of the crane. And you get 2 turns each try. The enemies can do things like fill the crane up with useless weapons, or like cast spells that make it so it like fills the entire crane up with like water, so the big heavy weapons you have float to the bottom, making it harder for you to grab them. And most of the time your bigger and heavier weapons will be like the more powerful ones, and it's a very interesting concept. You essentially get 2 crane pulls each turn before the enemy gets to attack you. So you have 2 chances to get things, and you can get things like shields and whatnot. And when you get shields, it stacks onto your health pool, and it like gives you a shield base where like if an enemy does like an attack of like 20 and you were able to get enough shields to make 30, then you don't take any damage. So part of the actual game consists of like spotting like what kind of enemy you're going to be fighting against and deciding, hey, do I need to like go for shields? Do I need to go for straight damage and what have you? And sometimes you get like little spells also, and the spells that you can grab out of there, which are done with like little potions, allow you to like poison enemies or do like certain things to them. And it's just a really good and interesting concept for a game. I already love crane games. Crane games are really fun. I'm quite good at them. And I liked the idea of this existing. And as you're like traveling through the dungeon, you get like these other areas. Like you'll go to your grandma's house as like one of the special events, and she has like piggy banks and money that you can get, and you have to like fish money out of the crane game. And then you can go into places like oh god, what's it called? Like a blacksmith, and the blacksmith can like upgrade your items that you have that appear in the crane and like make them more powerful items. So instead of doing like 5 damage, you do 10 damage per knife that you get out of the crane game. Or instead of doing like 4 poisons where it'll poison the enemy for 4 turns, you can up it to like 8 and stuff like that. It's a really, really interesting and different concept that I have not seen. I played the demo last year and it just released into early access. So I picked it up immediately. It was only like $8, and it's really fun. I've been having a blast with it.
Okay, it looks pretty neat, I would say.
Did I actually show you what it looks like, or did you just look it up?
I just looked while you were talking about it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's awesome. There's like little like extra things that happen. So like you could end up getting a 3rd claw, but the 3rd claw is a magnet. So any metal items that you have, when you drop it down, the claw like instantly makes those metal items like attached to it. So you're able to then bypass things like when they fill up the crane with like water and stuff like that. And you also get like a lot more damage done to the enemy because you have a magnet. So you're going to grab all of your metal items that you drop in that general area. And yeah, I mean, just in general, this is a super fun game. Like I'm excited to see where they go from here because there's already like a really good game here, and it's just in early access right now.
Oh, when is it set to come out?
Have no idea. Absolutely
Okay.
no idea. So you might hear about this again sometime down the line when it like releases on consoles and officially releases. My guess is next year, but like they basically stated that they released into early access because they wanted it to be a community based development, and
Hmm.
a lot of people ended up really enjoying the demo of the game, so they added a lot to it and then released it as like a, I think it's $8.99 is what it is, for the price of early access to get in on the ground floor. And they're taking feedback from people that play it in its early access state or have any information or thoughts on it, and they're going to improve it based on that.
Okay.
So
So at least
yeah,
they're taking some time on it.
yeah. I got some thoughts on it, and I guess I'll share those here.
Yeah.
I do think that a run is a little too long. So a run is 20 floors, right?
Okay.
I think there should be like an option where it like starts at maybe like 15 or something, but I do think that the difficulty should ramp up sooner, because I get to like floor 16, 17 after like 30, 40 minutes of gameplay,
Hmm.
and then like the difficulty curve just spikes massively, going from like nothing to like, what the fuck, I'm almost being one shot by some of these enemies. And it just depends on the RNG, obviously, because it is a roguelike and there is a lot of RNG elements to it. However, I do feel like they could pull back and like make it like 15 floors and like steadily increase the difficulty, other than having like a gigantic spike in like the last 10 floors or like, 5 floors. So that's my only complaint I really have about the game.
Hmm.
Otherwise, like, I get kind of lost just playing this. Like I just start playing it and then I'm like, wait, what? And yeah, it's really good. I like it a lot.
Okay.
I guess it
Yeah, it
wouldn't
sounds
even
really
be a
neat.
complaint, it's more like criticism or like a suggestion. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something that might get tweaked a bit,
Hmm.
depending on people's suggestions.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, really good game.
Okay. Yeah, no, it looks really interesting. I like that. I don't think it'd be something I would like, maybe just because I'm so bad at crane games, but
Hmm.
really like the concept. It's a neat idea.
Yeah, I guess I could talk about my other game as well, because it is the only other new thing on this list. So, would you like me to hop into that as well?
Yeah,
Or
sure.
okay, so I played Stalker 2. I've
Okay.
mentioned multiple times that this is one of the games I was looking forward to the most this year,
Hmm.
and I will say it is not disappointed at all. It is fantastic. Now, me saying that, and you probably having seen things like reviews and yada yada blah blah blah, uh, I probably got a lot to answer for.
I was just say I've seen some very not favorable reviews.
Yes, yes, you have. You sure have. You absolutely, positively have. So let me walk you through my game experience with this.
Okay.
I started playing this on Xbox first and
Uh-huh.
foremost. I did not go straight to PC because I saw all the issues and whatnot, and I it's Stalker. All right, so I don't know if you know a lot about the background of the game Stalker, but the original Stalker, when it released,
Hmm.
um, it was so broken on launch that most people that purchased it didn't get to play it for several weeks to a month. And a lot
Okay.
of the things that got fixed were through mods.
Uh-huh.
So I'll leave it at that for that. This game's less broken than the original games, but we live in a different time because the original Stalker came out in like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So there's that. Um, the other thing that I'm seeing a lot of people complain about when it comes to Stalker is that it's like its lack of any general like direction that it sends you in.
Hmm.
And that is the exact thing I wanted from a Stalker game. That's
Okay.
exactly what I wanted from Stalker 2. And that is exactly what I got. So I'm actually very, very happy about that element of it. So let me give you a few examples, because I
Okay.
have played this on both PC and Xbox.
Uh-huh.
I started on Xbox, as I stated, because this game's like almost 190 gigs. I didn't want to clear up 190 gigs on my PC to be able to
What?
play it. Anyway, but I did end up playing it on PC, but I'll get to that after. So, first and
Okay.
foremost, On console, the
Mhm.
experience has been totally fine for me. I've had no real issues. I even saw some people that did like reviews and everything that talked about how it dropped to like 0 frames when you entered certain areas. That has never happened to me, and I feel like it's absolutely bullshit. Maybe someone's Xbox was dying. I don't know, but there has been no moment period where anything like that has happened at all to me.
Mhm.
Does this game have a stable 60 FPS? Abso-fucking-lutely not. Was this game ever going to have a stable 60 FPS? No, it wasn't. There's a multitude of reasons for that. One of the main reasons, and this is I've been preaching this every single time it comes up in this fucking in conversation on this fucking podcast. It's using Unreal Engine 5. All right? Unreal
Uh-huh.
Engine 5 bad. It's simple as that. Unreal Engine 5 is never going to be good. It is a mess. Unreal has always been a mess. It should not have been the industry standard. It fucking sucks. Simple as that.
Yeah. Agreed.
Moving on from that.
Mhm.
A lot of the other problems I saw were people complaining about the difficulty of the game and how shit just kind of happens sometimes. And I will say once again, that's Stalker. That is it's supposed to be Stalker. That is always going to be Stalker. And the fact that that is the way that Stalker 2 plays makes me happy because that is what I was looking for. So let me break down a little bit of what Stalker is. So Stalker is essentially not really bandits, but like a group of like mercenaries or whatever you want to call it
Okay.
that search for anomalous items in what is known as the zone. And the zone is an area that has mutated both people and the world around it because of the Chernobyl incident way back when.
Mhm.
That is essentially what it is. It has also expanded out and everything, and people that are called stalkers go into the zone to hunt for rare artifacts that give them powers, and whatnot, and then they bring them back to like smaller pocket camps outside the zone area and sell those items.
Mhm.
And the entire general gameplay loop of this game revolves around going and exploring, finding people that are having things happen, doing a quest for them, and then coming back and getting your loot or whatever from those people that you've done a quest for. For instance, I went to one of the main town hub areas at the beginning of the game, and this guy, I did like small little quest for him. It was like, hey, there's a drop here, and drops are essentially backpacks that are hidden somewhere in the world. And he's like, I need you to go get the drop for me. And so you go there and you get the stuff for him. But when you get there, essentially to get the drop, the reason why the person that was supposed to get the drop initially and come back didn't is because they got attacked by a pack of like wild, blind mutated dogs that then attack you, and there's like 12 of them, and they're really difficult to fight because they just keep like ganging up on you essentially. So like, they got mutated because they can no longer see, but where they lost that sense, their like sense of smell is like immaculate. So like the second you get attacked by one of them and you start bleeding, then they know exactly where you're at and they're all over you all the time, and it makes
Okay.
it very difficult. And that's going to be the key point I'm going to say a lot during this is difficulty. This game is very, very hard. It does not hold your hand. You can die to the easiest enemy just as well as you can die to a gigantic fuck off mutant that can go invisible and kill you out of nowhere. It's somewhat horror game, it's somewhat stealth game, it's a big action game, it's a whole lot of things. If you've heard before, I've talked about a game called Tarkov, which is an extraction shooter where you go to a place, you're fighting a bunch of other people, you get items, and then you extract with those items and bring them back to your base to be able to build up the base, and yada 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 blah blah blah. Tarkov is a game that is based off the Stalker series. So the gameplay loop of these extraction games that are coming out now is based off of a series that started in 2007. And that series from 2007 just got a sequel in 2024. Um, Are there some issues? Yes. There have always been issues when it comes to games like this because of things like. Let me just be honest. The company that makes these games, the Stalker games in general, they are not amateurs, right? But
Mm-hmm.
they do make a lot of mistakes. They do have your general Bethesda glitchiness, even more so before Bethesda had its Bethesda glitchiness. And it's just gotten worse over time. With as their other games basically came out and the same because there's three of the first Stalker games. They're not sequels, they're expansions to the first game, but they're also standalone expansions, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, those games are all very well known for being jank. So kind of having the jank in this game is sort of like being right at home with the Stalker franchise as it already is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a lot of the problems or the like jank in this game are really bad because they're not like game breaking. At least what I have experienced is not game breaking. So a bit of explanation on what I've experienced
Okay.
on Xbox. I've experienced things known as enemy lockers. I don't know if you know what that is.
No.
But essentially, it's where you go to a certain part of the map and you like see a guy and you like kill him, and then immediately another one pops in that same area, and then you can
Oh,
kill
okay.
him, and then you can kill them, and you can kill them, and you can kill them, and you can do that essentially forever, and you can kind of like really tank the frame rate by doing that because it's like where the enemy spawns in at, but you can get close enough that you can just continuously respawn them and kill them and then take their ammo and their stuff and whatnot and really load yourself out by doing so that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like a bit of a problem. It's essentially like pulling back the curtain, seeing how like the cookies are made, that sort of deal, because someone didn't close off an area. But you can get to that area and you can actually take advantage of using that area, so it also can be used as an exploit. But that happens every now and again. There's some pop in, which there's always going to be pop in. It's a fucking Unreal Engine game. It's as simple as that. There's some general jank with the like ragdolls and stuff like that. These are the things I have seen that are very minor problems on Xbox.
Okay.
Uh, I will explain one of my biggest issues with the PC version when I get to that in a minute.
Okay.
One other thing I'll say about the Xbox version is this game does feel a little bit too big for console, because when you're playing this game on PC, you have a whole ass keyboard at your disposal for when to pull out your items, such as like your tracker or your pistol or your secondary weapon or your like rifle or whatever, and like to be able to change the ammo type and to do this, that, and the other, which is also very important because say you're fighting something like mutants, you're going to want to use like piercing ammo type instead. So you're going to want to swap over from normal ammo to like the piercing ammo so you do more damage. Because, for example, when I went into this one mission area and I went to go get the anomalous artifact, I dropped down into this cave that was underneath someone's house, and
Mm-hmm.
right in front of me it like did like essentially like the Predator, you know how it has that active camo that kind of makes it a little wavy where you could see what's going on there but like not quite, and
Yeah.
it kind of stands out that way. Well, it
Mm-hmm.
turned off its active camo and there was like a big mutant right in front of me when I got into the cave, and it fucking punched the shit out of me, and I took a lot of damage and I had to heal very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And in this game, you heal either using medical syringes or bandages. And when you heal, if you're constantly bleeding, you actually need to bandage yourself first before, using a medical syringe to heal yourself. So you need to like essentially tourniquet and then use the normal healing item so that you don't continue losing health.
Yeah.
The game's very out there and very weird, but the actual like gameplay mechanics, such as the healing system, such as the system that you need for being able to like stay awake in areas or being able to you know avoid radiation poisoning, that sort of stuff. All of that has a much more like real feeling, like a much more difficult element to it.
Mm-hmm.
So even though like this game is very um yeah, kind of like turned up to 11 with its weird factor. Like, for instance, there's like an anomaly that's literally a poppy field, and when you walk into it, you'll start feeling tired, and you'll need to like constantly pound energy drinks so you don't pass out and get assaulted in by the anomaly and whatnot. Um, it's a very interesting game that has a lot of really difficult mechanics to it, and if you don't know those mechanics, it will absolutely bend you over its knee and beat the shit out of your ass. It tries to teach you that very quickly. Uh, for instance, in the opening of the game, you need to run from place to place, putting down a spike into the ground and taking the object that you have, the artifact, and putting it inside there and charging at each one of the different places in the world. And when you're doing this, you have the general story that's panning out, and the story's it's fine. But like when you play Stalker or Stalker 2 in this case, the game's not about the story, it's about the exploration, it's about the world building. It's about your journey in this place, essentially, more so than it is about like a gripping narrative or whatever. And essentially, the opening starts, and it gives you a pretty basic story where you had this special artifact that no one's ever seen before. You went to go get it charged up. You went to the third charging position, and after that, you got assaulted by a bunch of people who you ended up killing some of their men. But then, as you tried to get away, you got captured. But for some reason, the person that captured you didn't kill you because it was the dead of night. So instead, they like punched you with their gun and then fired it in the air, so the people that were around them thought they shot you in the head, so they let you live for some reason. So why did this person let you live? Where is my special artifact? Where is my scanner that has been stolen from me? Who were those guys? And like, how can I get it back? That's essentially the main plot of the game. So you're going from town to town, you're going from level to level, area to area, city to city, that sort of deal, and exploring the world, trying to figure out what happened to you, who sold you out, who took your artifact, and how can you get it back. And when you first wake up, you have nothing. But this is a game that is kind of like an immersive sim. So you can do things to beat the game, essentially. So if you were, for instance, to instead of put your artifact into the ground to charge it one last time to finally find out all of its power and unlock it and this, that, and the other, and do all the stuff you needed to do to be able to figure out, hey, what exactly is this thing? If you just went to another room right next to you, there's a safe, and if you go in that safe and place all of your weapons and then trigger the final cutscene before the tutorial is over, once you have that moment where you get stripped of all your weapons, they strip you of the weapons you had on hand, not the ones you put in that safe. So you can go back to that same place, get all your weapons that you started with at the beginning of the game out and your armor, and you could start with a pretty decent loadout at the beginning of the game. And I think that's one of the things that makes this game so interesting, because you can break it, because it does want you to break it by doing things like that. It wants you to think ahead of time and to think things through, and or to find out things that you could have done later and try a different playthrough or whatever and do that instead. So like once I learned that you could do that, I decided to restart, and because I was only like an hour in, and I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do that. So that's what I did, and it did let me do that. It did let me keep my weapons. It did let me keep my armor. So going into the first town and making my way there, where there's like a shootout and there are people that will genuinely attack you for no reason, just because there are other people across that they don't like, and you happen to be walking down the street. I had a lot more firepower to take care of those people than I would have the first time. And it's little things like that which kind of teaches you things along the way, teaches you to be a better stalker, teaches you how to do better at the game with that general like knowledge that you get from just playing the game.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so good. because you do get to explore, you do get to find these areas, you do get to find these things that you're like, how the fuck do I beat this? But then you just kind of go back in there. Maybe you go get more ammo, maybe you get a different type of ammo, maybe you get a different weapon from someone, and then you come back with that later on and try to beat it by doing that, essentially. And there's always going to be something for you to find out in the zone.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, there's always somewhere to explore, and it's really, really fun. Like I've been having a blast playing this game because it's unlike any other game that's on the market, because it is really hard. Like you see like mutants in something like, for instance, Metro, or like some other game like Half-Life, and you kill them in like 2 shots. It ain't that here. You're going through like an entire magazine. You're going through like 20 shotgun shells for one enemy. It really teaches you to like, you got to take these threats seriously. Do you actually want to go through this area where the mutants are? Do you actually want to do that? Or do you potentially want to find another entrance in? Do you want to maybe find some explosives? Yada, 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 blah, 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 and whatnot. It really makes the enemies feel like a threat. And it's not just the people that you interact, and it's not just the mutants that you interact with that feel like a threat. It's the people also, because sometimes they'll have giant platoons out there like stationed on like buildings, and like when you get close to them, there's already a sniper that has a dot on your head and you're about to get shot and you don't even know it yet. And it's elements like that that is just, it does not hold your hand, it does not tell you it's coming, and you learn by dying. You learn by having you learn by having those experiences, and I think that's something very different from any other game that's on the market right now. And like I said, there's a lot that you can do there with a lot of buttons, and on the keyboard it feels like right at home. But on a controller, there's really not enough buttons on a controller to do a lot of the things in this game that you have to do. And they work with what they've got, and I think it works decently. But I do think a lot is lost in translation when playing on a controller versus when playing on like mouse and keyboard. But the flip side of that is this game is really, really intensive on PC, like super intensive. For instance, I have a very decent PC, and the game, without frame gen, I cannot get over 60 FPS. So I have to use frame gen, and frame gen, as I've talked about before, is where they basically use AI to give you extra frames more than you actually would have, which then enhances the game and makes it feel like you're playing at a higher FPS, when in all actuality it's just rendering multiple frames at a time. Nvidia's gotten better at frame gen and is like the best way to experience it, in my opinion. So it's not that bad. It doesn't cause as much visual problems on Nvidia as it does on AMD, which, nothing wrong with AMD, but they need to up their frame gen game a little bit. And it shows when you're playing it, and it also introduces input lag if you aren't at 60 at all times when you double that frame rate, because you are essentially, if you're playing at 40 FPS and you enable frame gen, you're still playing at 40 FPS, but it essentially puts a filter on it that makes it a higher frame rate, like double the frame rate. So it'd be like 80 or 70 or whatever. But if you're not at 60, it's still going to feel slightly weird. And sometimes the game can drop below 60. It is not very well optimized, in my opinion. But I do think that's a problem overall with a lot of games this generation, when it comes to playing them on PC. And for that reason, I think it's good to have both a console and a PC, then decide where you want to play. This game, when it works on PC, it works really, really well. When I first installed it and played it, I was having some general issues that were fixed by updating drivers, which is always a common thing that you should do whenever a brand new game comes out. You should update your drivers and make sure everything's running the way it should. And I did, and it fixed everything, and it was great. But there are a few technical issues. There is something that is known as Z-fighting. Do you know what that term means?
No, I've never even heard the term.
Okay, so it's when you know how when you're in a game, it will load like the lower end texture when you're further away, and as you
Yes.
get closer, it pops in the like your high res texture, that sort of deal.
Yeah.
Well, there's a thing called Z fighting where the two textures kind of fight with each other and are loaded in at the same time and
Uh-huh.
produce like this grainy shadow effect that's kind of broken and doesn't look good because both textures loaded on top of each other. And that is what essentially happens here, where two axes are having two different things loaded in on top of it, and it's causing the like very bad shadow effect on the wall, and it's causing like this kind of glitched look where it doesn't look natural, and in fact you can kind of see like the polygons somewhat when you like look at it. So like it's like a big square, so instead of being like shaded together correctly and like being one general thing that pops in and takes its place, you see both of the textures like flashing in and out, and like you see the shadow maps of both of those textures flashing in and out on top of each other, and it looks really bad when you run into something like that. It looks really glitchy. It's not good. It doesn't cause any performance problems, but it just doesn't look good, and that is a real issue on the PC port of Stalker 2 in my opinion. I've seen it a number of times happen. It's not like been like once in an hour or something. It's like I've gone into an entire building and that's been a problem in that whole last building, and that's just not good. It does not look good, and that caused me to play it more on console than on PC. From what I understand, I think on the AMD side of things, the game runs better. Not necessarily better in a way where it's like, fixing those problems, but those problems are minimized. And also, the stutter that you get when entering towns is minimized as well. There is definitely a stutter that you get when you enter towns on PC. Even with my like 4070 Ti, which is like one below being like enthusiast brand, because enthusiast is like the 4080 and the 4090. I'm like right there on the cusp of it, so it's like high end and everything. I still get the stutter in the game because it's an Unreal Engine 5 game, because it is using that engine. There are these problems where when certain checkpoints are crossed, they're like invisible checkpoints you can't actually see, but they're like markers where it's like, if you cross this thing, activate blah blah blah, that sort of deal. That's like, more under the hood sort of thing of the game. When you step across those areas, it will give you like a little stutter when you're entering like a place, because it's like loading in all those assets that it deloaded before when you left said place. And that's just a problem with Unreal Engine 5 that cannot be fixed on PC. Or that Epic doesn't give a shit about fixing. So that's an overarching problem that isn't because of your graphics card. It's just always going to happen. So, yeah. If you don't mind those issues and would rather have a higher end experience, then yeah, playing on PC is the way to go. However, I think it's just simpler to play on console right now
Yeah,
than
it
it
makes
is on
sense from what you're
PC.
saying.
But like I said, Stalker people, like Stalker fans, are used to issues in their game. So like this game has like very positive reviews and everything, and is being very well received on PC. So
Oh, good. Yeah,
yep,
I'm sure that team's probably just happy to have the game out so they can take a break for a little bit.
well,
Because,
hopefully.
yeah, hopefully. Exactly.
Yeah, there is still a war going on. It might be a little bit difficult for them to take a break.
Well, break from having to develop in the middle of the war. At least they can probably spread
Well,
out a bit.
they have put out multiple patches since the game is released, so they are actually working on it. So I don't think they're really taking that much of a break right now.
Yeah, probably at least get themselves to at least like kind of the launch window and maybe kind of regroup, I would think.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's good. They did expansions for the first one, right? Am I
Oh, yeah,
mistaken?
yeah. I explained when I was telling you about the game that they were standalone expansions
Oh,
that
okay.
released after the initial release of the game.
Okay. I must have missed
I
the
own
standalone
most of them,
expansion
so
part. Yeah.
yeah. It was when I was talking. Like they had Call of Pripyat, they had Clear Sky, and they had Shadow of Chernobyl, and
Call of what?
Pripyat,
Okay.
Pripyat. I think that's how it's pronounced.
No clue. I was just like, I have no clue what word just came out of your mouth. So,
Again, this is like Russian, Ukrainian, that sort of deal. So like that's the actual world of the game. So yeah.
yeah, makes sense.
I don't know how to pronounce those words, but yeah.
Me either. I couldn't even guess. I was just like, that's a weird sounding thing that just came out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I really, really enjoy Stalker 2. It's been a very fun game to experience because when you are playing Stalker 2, it is an experience. Like there are like radiation storms where you actually have to like take cover indoors. And
Mm-hmm.
those elements are not really scripted, and that's what makes them really cool because you could be doing anything and those sort of things show up and then it's like, damn, this is neat. So it makes the world feel more lived in, more alive.
Yeah, which is good. You don't need an empty,
Mm-hmm.
dead world.
Exactly.
Especially one that's trying to get you to explore and see things. So,
Exactly.
mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
2 thumbs up for me when it comes to Stalker. Love it.
okay.
Lots of fun.
Yeah, and hopefully they keep making it better, through the post-release period.
That
So,
seems to be something they've always been good at. Like
mm-hmm.
you mentioned with the expansions and whatnot, they've also been good at keeping up the games. And if they can't do it because they're a smaller team,
Mm-hmm.
you know who can? It's the fan base with their mods, and I know for a fact that there are already a lot of really good mods on the PC version for Stalker 2.
Oh,
So.
awesome. Mm-hmm. That's great. What else you got?
Those are my 2 games I played. Those are the only 2 games I really spent time playing this week.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah,
All right. Well, I'm gonna talk about Mario and Luigi Brothership.
let's hear it.
So at this point, I have to be like spitting distance from Endgame. So
Hmm.
I feel like I can give a pretty reasonable kind of fuller take on this game now compared to before. I'm like 40 hours into it. I think is about what I had when I looked at it yesterday. I want to say somewhere in that
Hmm.
30 to 40 hour range. So definitely is it's there's a good amount of stuff going on there. So I know I talked about it before. So Mario and Luigi, if you're familiar with the series, turn-based RPG. It has kind of like those action commands, which the Mario RPGs are known for. So it's got kind of that aspect of it. So this
Hmm.
game, I would say gameplay wise, does pretty well. It has, it's your normal moves, which are kind of like the hammer and jump, which you kind of use depending on does the enemy fly or the spikes, those that kind of discretionary stuff there. Um, then you go to the moves. You have the kind of the group moves, like the brothers moves, where you can kind of get like almost like quick time events to kind of go through about different kind of attacks where you're working together with your partner Luigi or Mario, whichever way you want to look at it, and kind of go that way. Um, and those are always a lot of fun. You have kind of more limited. It's kind of like your magic system in an RPG where you have kind of your BP meter and you only have so much to kind of use there. So that's kind of cool. You have your traditional Mario items, which give you, your kind of refills and everything.
Hmm.
So I think the gameplay, like that kind of core gameplay, I think it's good. Definitely could probably use maybe some variety, like a little more variety, and kind of like the enemy battles, because I feel like a lot of times you get into one and you're like, oh, it's 6 Shy Guys again or whatever. Um, so when you're on like different islands, this game is broken up in islands, you see kind of like a lot of the same enemies. Not a big concern there, but like I
Hmm.
said, maybe some more variety to it. But I enjoy the battles when I have them. And they're easily like dodgeable if you kind of want to like run away from them. So there's that. It does still give you kind of like the first attack advantage if you use different attacks. Like your jumper hammer before you go into a battle. So that's kind of that. You have brother moves that you can use kind of while you're exploring the world too. Like one lets Mario and Luigi kind of turn into a spaceship and kind of fly around for a few seconds. They had similar-ish ones in the previous game, so it's not like these are like anything new. It's just kind of like these are the flavors of this particular Mario and Luigi game.
Hmm.
So that's that. So let me talk more about the weaker points of it. Um, One, this game's way too fucking talky, like too much. So like it likes to talk a lot, likes to over explain things. But the thing that gets me the most is it likes to interrupt you from doing things. Like, so one of the things I think I talked about it before. So this game has kind of like an island mechanic, and it has ocean maps, and you're traveling between like islands, kind of a set path. It kind of reminds me of like, strangely enough, maybe like Spirit Tracks, where you kind of have like these different lanes that you're kind of like water currents that you can go down, like on tracks, and you're kind of going certain ways, and you can loop yourself around islands or whatever to do that. But there's certain things that will pop up, like, if you're coming across an island and you need to launch to it, or there's these different explorable kind of reefs, or even like these mini, like special islands that all pop up. Those are all there. But depending on where you're in the story, you could be standing right next to the cannon when something's coming by, and it will be like, no, you have to go talk to so and so. We can't do that right
Oh,
now.
that kind of shit. Yeah, I
Yeah,
gotcha.
that shit pisses me off so much. I'm literally standing. You can't let me like look out my view scope and see this thing so I don't have to circle around again. Well, fuck you too. So, and then you go and do your thing. Like, it does stuff like that. That I find really annoying. The other thing is probably until about what I would consider the event that kind of correlates with maybe like 75% of the game, the story was a huge like nothing burger. Like
Hmm.
like just very low like incentive to care about what was going on. Because basically the story is, Mario and Luigi are like hanging out in the Mushroom Kingdom one day, and then all of a sudden, I don't remember what happens. One of them's chased by bees or something and almost falls off a cliff, and the other one saves the other one. And then because they held hands, it's the magic of partnership, and this portal opens up, and they're sucked into this other universe that just got. Uh, it was like an island, kind of like a circular island, kind of like a donut around a tree in the middle. Well, the tree got killed, and so all the little islands around the tree drifted off, and that's kind of where you're going. You're trying to restore this island, continent or whatever. So that's kind of where that story is. But like, you really don't care. Like, okay, it's not the Mushroom Kingdom. These aren't people just some strange little outlet girls. Like, help me. And you're like, well, I guess. But even then, there's not like any real urgency. Bad guys don't really show up that often, and at first their plans just kind of like not anything remotely like sinister. But around like 75% of the way in, it kind of changes, and you're like, okay, things are getting a little bit more serious now. But this is after you've done things like wedding planning and just things that are like you really could care less about. Like, it wants you to care about the NPCs, but then it really doesn't on the same like token. So that's just kind of I wish the story had like a little bit more urgency to it. And I also wish it just didn't interrupt you all the time. Let me play the way I want to play. If there's something important, like I can go walk to it, but don't stop me from doing what I want to do. So those are those kind of things. Also, I would say music's kind of weak. I think I talked about it before. I still think it's pretty weak. I've heard some better tracks since then, but nothing that I'm like, oh man, this music's great. I mean, it's tolerable. I think I described it as like Mario Party-esque music, and I still stand by that. It's kind of just like generic, fun Mario sounding music, but nothing that's gonna get stuck in your head. Nothing that's like truly memorable. Um, so yeah, that's that kind of thing. I'm trying to think if there's any other like big things to hit on it. It does have a bunch of side quests, but I do like, though, it doesn't really kind of just gives them to you. Like, you don't have to like search around and find people, which is nice because they're all on like different islands. You'll get something like so and so on this island wants to talk to you about this. Sure, that's fine. Go over there and kind of do those kind of things. But not anything that's need you to go and find the NPCs to talk to find out where to go, kind of thing. They at least kind of tell you what's there, and they tell you up front which ones are. It's like this side quest. If you don't complete it, it will be losable in the future. Some of them expand on like the NPC stuff, but again, kind of like I said about the story, most of it's kind of like a nothing burger. So it's interesting, kind of maybe character development, but not anything that you're like really care about. I guess is maybe a good way to put it. And also too, one thing, at least the ones that I played, it does have some boss battle refights. I think I've done 2 of them already, even though I haven't finished the game yet.
The
and actually,
repeats? Damn.
not repeats, like optional, like side quests. Like, you know how like you can go back to like a boss that you fought in other games, and you can fight a more difficult version of that boss. Like, they just offer those up as side quests. I thought they were actually fun. So, because they actually did ramp up the difficulty quite a bit. So, and I actually did kind of struggle through the last one. The game gives you enough tools to kind of combat it, but you really kind of just have to be on your game. And actually, that does kind of remind me too. I did talk about one mechanic I kind of like in this game is it has kind of what they call like these battle plugs, where there are these plugs that offer you kind of bonuses for battling.
Okay.
That you can plug in. So like one might be like auto mushroom. Like if you get to a point where your character can use a mushroom, it'll just use it automatically instead of having you waste a turn to do it. Another one is like if you get an excellent rating on a brother's move, a BP move, it will only charge you half cost. You'll get half of the cost back. So things like that. They have limited amounts of uses. Like the mushroom one is like 5 uses, and then it's taken out and it's got to be recharged, and you can put a different plug in. And there's like, I don't know, tens of plugs that you can choose from. So it's not like you have a shortage. My only complaint with that system right now is like a lot of the plugs are so limited in their uses that I feel like you're resetting them like every turn. And be like, okay, well, you've gone through the 10 things for this one. Now you got to do something else. They do make some really cool combos though, where it's like for example, like one is, I think of a good one. Okay, so one is like a fire move, and there's another plug that gives you an ice move. And if you use them together, it actually gives you like a more powerful fire and ice move if you're using them in conjunction with each other, like stuff like that.
Okay.
So they have some like nice combinations there. Even kind of with the mushroom one, they have your auto mushroom one, but they have another plug that if you have that one plugged in, instead of just using like the most basic mushroom, it will actually find the most appropriate mushroom for you and use that instead. So instead of like a standard mushroom, it might use a super mushroom because that will give you more health and that will bring it closer to like your full health instead of just giving you like a 20 HP boost when you actually probably could use 60 or something. So I really actually like that system. I just wish I just didn't feel like I have to micromanage it as much. That's pretty cool though. I did really like it. It has things like that. It has a bunch of different kind of like explorable things. Like you get these, I forget what they're called. There's these little glowing things that you can collect, and that's kind of how you build more plugs. And they're hidden around the islands. And when you have your map open, you can see where they are. So it's not that you can't find them. You just have to go and get them. It's just kind of more of a matter of doing it. And then once you pull them out, you chase them down. It's kind of just nice to explore with them. I don't really consider them a negative thing. I think they're actually pretty good. But I think that's kind of most of my big takes on there. There's lots to do in this game. Like they do have like enough kind of side things to keep you busy. Like I said, there's kind of those things. They even have like a fishing mini game that can kind of give you different things on there as well. There's a little bit of a crafting system in there as well. So there's a bunch of different mechanics to pull on. I said this last time, and I still believe it. I think this is probably the best Mario and Luigi game in a while. At least, I think it's probably the best one since at least the DS. Because I think this one's better than the 2 3DS ones that I can think of off the top of my head. Definitely better than Paper Jam. Paper Jam was not great.
Sure wasn't.
No. And then there was, I try to think what the other one was, like Luigi's Dream Team. I don't remember that one being bad. I just never got into it, never finished it. This one I feel much more interested in. And I do they have a lot of Luigi love in this game, and I don't know where that kind of stemmed from. Maybe it's from kind of their history with it before, but they definitely kind of make Luigi kind of out to be like a secretly smart character, and kind of the way that plays in the story, I think is interesting. Actually, one other thing that this game does lack, humor. It does not have the humorous moments of like some of the old Mario and Luigi games. Kind of reminded me of, what was it, 2 weeks ago when we were talking about like the games that are just translated by AI. Like this is what I would imagine a game that's translated by AI would sound like. It's just very bland and just kind of like impersonal. Like you're getting the whole story, but you're just kind of like, oh, okay. Like I just don't feel like there's much creativity behind the words that they're using.
Okay.
It's fine, but it has a story. But overall, I would say very good, like enjoyable game. I know I kind of just gave my like least favorite things kind of up front, and I think that anyone that's listening, those are important points to kind of consider if you think that this is a game that you might enjoy. But I would say overall, definitely I do enjoy it. If you like Mario RPG kind of games, you probably will really like it. If you like the Mario and Luigi games in the past, you probably should really like it. As it just really feels like it's kind of lacking on the story side of things. I wish it just kind of had something that gave a little bit more urgency with it. So, yeah, my thoughts on Brothership. I might have another update again on it when I finish it if something like strangely compelling happens there. But I don't. I'm pretty sure I'm like on my way to the final boss right now. So, but that's the other thing that this game does too. It just like you think you're doing one thing, and then it's like surprise, that's not what we're doing. You have a whole lot more stuff to do. I'm like, okay, that's fine, whatever. So, yeah. So that's my thoughts on Brothership. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. All right. I only had one piece of news, and it's a rumor. So
is it the PlayStation thing?
Yeah.
I have a piece of news that's actually really funny, but we'll do yours first.
Okay. Yeah, so rumor is supposedly Sony is working on another portable. This one is supposed to be more targeted towards the Switch. Supposedly will let people play their PlayStation 5 games on the go.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a bad idea if they can do it right. And that's kind of more the, I think that's the bigger asterisk.
My biggest takeaway from that is, hey, the PS Vita existed and Sony forgot it did after 6 months.
Yeah, and what was that other thing that they put out that I can't remember the name ever?
Oh, actually, the Portal. That's actually a really good. Is that what we're going to talk about? The one that came out like last year or this year?
Yeah.
I don't remember which one is. So actually, they did something pretty neat for the Portal very recently. You can now actually just directly stream games from the PlayStation store to your Portal. Before you had to stream it from your PlayStation 5 to your Portal. Now you can go and directly stream them without even having your PS5 turned on. That was an update like a few weeks ago, and I think that's a step in the right direction. I think that's what the PS Portal needed to be in the first place.
Yeah, huge step in the right direction.
So, yeah, you know, if it comes down to like streaming devices now, when you like talk about it, I don't think the PS Portal is that big of like a waste of money, right?
Well, question though. I do have one.
Go for it.
Does it allow you to stream them from the store if you only own the physical game?
So no. For instance, if you have like a PS Plus extra subscription or a PS Plus whatever subscription, any of the games that are on that service that gives you the option to stream them, you could stream to the portal now. So you don't have to own a physical copy. And I think some of the games that people own, just like what Xbox just rolled out, some of the games that people own already that they own digitally, they can also stream those as well, to the best of my knowledge. So I don't have one. I can't tell you, but I will say this: a screen of the portal, a handheld of the portal, and I'm going to call it a handheld now because it's not just specifically, okay, I guess I'll call it a streaming device, but it is taking a step in the right direction when you can not just directly stream from your console being turned on and you no longer require a console. So essentially what someone could do now at this point is to buy a portal and play PS5 games through streaming instead of buying a PS5 and playing them natively. And I don't think that's a bad deal. I think that's pretty good idea, honestly. I think if someone's more strapped for cash, but they still want to be able to play they still want to be able to play PS5 games, or they want to hop into the generation, a little bit late, but they don't want to really go all in. And, maybe they're just like dabbling in it to see if they care. I think this is a really good option for them now with this kind of options with the portal now. I think the portal's no longer as useless as it launched.
Yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm nothing if not reasonable when it comes to things. when things get better, right? Yeah. Right? And I do think this has gotten better by allowing this sort of thing to happen. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Because now you're just looking at like a better version of like a bone controller, like those ones you attach to your phones and everything. It's like that, but but now you have a PS5 controller, and the DualSense 5 that we're on right now, it's an excellent controller. And having that as your main controller and being able to play PS5 games without a PS5 is a really good option for $200.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
So but going back to what we were initially talking about with handhelds and whatnot, Sony dropped the Vita very, very quickly, and I don't know how well they would support a handheld console. I do think they might end up doing something similar to like a Steam Deck if they do go for a handheld, but I don't exactly know how they would go about it. So there's that. So yeah, I hope they do well because I love seeing new handhelds, and I love seeing what people can cram into a handheld. And I personally think the PSP is a really fucking good handheld, and that was Sony's first try at it, and they knocked it out of the park. And then they had a lot of good games that released on the Vita, and the community kept the Vita alive, and it was a really good handheld as well. But Sony just stepped in the way every single step of the way to try to stop the Vita from being good, or just because they didn't care. They just didn't do anything with it. They're like, yeah, I don't know. I hope that they care. That's my main takeaway.
With that one, I think it's more of a what's the word I'm looking for? I don't think it's not that they don't care. I think it's more that they with the Vita, I think it was just they really underestimated that market. Because when they, if you remember, when the 3DS launched and it kind of sold like shit, Sony was like kind of laughing. They're like, "Oh, ha 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 ha! We're gonna slaughter it when we come out with the Vita," and that was definitely not the case. So yeah, it definitely kind of, I don't know, just kind of more of how Sony was then. They're acting, kind of how they act today. Just kind of be like, "Oh, we can do no wrong." And the Vita was a good handheld. Like they had a very nice system there. A couple missteps hardware wise, but nothing major. But it really came down to the just kind of that. It actually had some really good software too. Like they actually had really decent, I would say, first party support kind of up front. But yeah, they just were not able to sustain it. And I think the other thing that really kind of bonked them over was that their proprietary memory cards. Like if they just had used an SD card, probably would have been better off. But I don't know. I don't necessarily think that's so compelling to have like bricked the system, but definitely probably something that kind of weighed heavily on people when they're like, "Oh, I got to spend how much on these memory cards?" Because they were expensive, wildly expensive. So yeah, so hopefully, yeah. I mean, honestly, if they even brought back just kind of the Vita and just kind of like added a few more buttons to make it up to snuff with the PlayStation 5, I think that would be fine.
Or get this. Allow people to play their PS5 games on the Vita through streaming, similar to what they just, not Vita, or whatever their next handheld is, through streaming, similar to what they just did with the Portal. Like that's a good step that's like a great step in the right direction if they were to do something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Would it cannibalize the Portal sales? Yes, but they already kind of did that by releasing streaming not directly from the console so late into its lifespan. But I do think they could bring it back if they took that technology and put it in their next handheld. So you'd have people that could be like, "Hey, I'm playing my, let's say Vita 3. Let's just give it a random name or whatever. I'm playing my Vita 3 games natively. But if I wanted to continue, say something like Metaphor Wreath Fantasia, which just came out a month ago now. It's a turn-based RPG, not that difficult to play while streaming. Just stream your PS5 turn-based RPG that you bought on your PS handheld of whatever it's called. And I think that would be a really great option to try to like connect similar to the Switch, because you're not going to be able to do the same thing the Switch does, which is take a PS5 with you on the go. But you could be able to stream your games like in bed or somewhere, like if you go out on like a trip or whatever, use like the business internet to stream your games, not having to have your PS5 turned on at home. That would be a very big like step up from what they have with the Portal right now.
I thought you said that's kind of what the Portal did, though.
That is what the Portal does now. You're correct. However, having a native handheld that works as a native handheld, like say a PS Vita 3 or a PS whatever 3, PSP 3, whatever, and then being able to also like pick up where you left off on your PS5 game.
I see
those two is why I'm saying that's what would make the difference. You understand?
No, I see what you're saying there. I'm curious. At least the way the rumor kind of read,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't seem like it was going to have exclusive hardware or software.
Interesting.
But who knows? It's too early. So
Yeah, it
we're
is too
talking
early.
out a rumor.
We'll get there eventually.
Yeah, because at least it's kind of the take that I had read on it was meant to play PS5 games specifically.
Okay.
The other thing that's kind of, I think, difficult with that too is like, especially if it's, we're talking like, because obviously it's not going to be running discs. Like it's not going to be
No,
something
absolutely not. Absolutely not.
like the sheer amount of space needed to play some like download games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to handle that. That's going to be a big kind of mystery. So, because otherwise it'd be like, all right, the PlayStation, I don't know, we'll call it Vita 3 because that's what you called it. Only can hold 2 games at once because of how big they are. Like it would just be like, and I think that might even be optimistic depending on how much room they give you. So, yeah, we'll have to see that because that I think will be a big deal breaker. So, because if it comes out like ludicrously expensive and they're like, hey, if you want to actually make it usable, you have to buy like, I don't know, like a terabyte memory card. Well, that kind of,
I think we're past the point of memory cards. I think it would have to have soldered memory like laptops do nowadays. You know what I'm talking about? We're like the ability to have like an SSD slot. I think we have to be at that point right now. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to fit more than 2 games, like you just said. And these games keep getting bigger, so you wouldn't even be able to fit 2 in the future.
yeah, exactly. So, and that's, I think that's great. I know they just, what was it? I know SD cards have grown beyond 2 gigabytes, or not 2 gigabytes, definitely 2 gigabytes. Grown beyond 2 terabytes now. I think they just developed like maybe I think a 4 terabyte one. But still, like
I think there's been 4 terabyte for a while now, but what I'm saying is we don't need proprietary bullshit. You need to stick to like NVMe's. You have to do that if you want. If you're going to have external, otherwise you need to have like 2 terabytes internal, or like the option to have that. If you're going to have games the size of like PS5 games on your handheld, which I don't necessarily know how that would work per se. But then you look at something like the Steam Deck. And they have the games that are like huge on their handheld, so it have to be something similar to that. Where like you could also use micro SD cards, like normal micro SD cards, because micro SD cards do allow like several terabytes of data to be on micro SD cards, and you can get really fast ones as well. But I still think if we're talking about PS5 games, which are very well known for their fast loading times and in some cases non-existent loading times almost. I think you need an SSD. I think you need an SSD to be able to run whatever the next handheld would be.
Probably. This thing's going to be stupid expensive, though. So I can't even fathom how they would make this at a reasonable cost. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. And I'm just going to say this, right? You look at the Steam Deck, you look at the ROG Ally, you look at what have you, and handhelds now are beyond the point of no return. You have $800, you have $600, you have smaller like quantity, like either a smaller chipset or a smaller like amount that it can hold, which is what the Steam Deck does. The lower priced ones have lower internal memory. So for instance, like my Steam Deck is one that's like $300 now that has like 256 gigs. So I just expand via SSD via an SD card, not SSD. Sorry, you can do that if you use a dock. You can plug an SSD into a dock, but I think their best bet would be to do something like have. And I know this is an egregious amount of money, but when you look at the other handhelds that are out there right now, I don't think it's as bad when you think about it in that respect. So, for instance, you look at the latest ROG Ally and you're looking at like $800. You look at the new limited edition Steam Deck that comes out with, I think, 2 terabytes, and it's in a fancy white color and it's limited to only so many, $650. Sweet spot would be like $600 for the handheld, but that's the one that has 2 terabytes. You go down to a single terabyte, $499, and if you have a 512, $350. Simple as that. Simple as that. You'd
What's
be able
the
to get
base cost for the PlayStation 5 right now?
the base cost for the PS5 right now is $450.
Okay, yeah, this is not happening anytime soon.
Well, yeah, obviously it's not happening in the future. It's happening in the future. But also what I'm trying to say is I do think the handheld market is a little bit different. And depending on the specs of said handheld, when it comes down to it, if you look at its competition, right? Because its competition is not your PS5, your PS6, your PS what the fuck ever. That's not its competition. Its competition are these other handhelds. So if you can undercut these other handhelds,
yeah, but the problem is, though, it's made specifically to play PlayStation 5 games.
Correct, but there are a lot of multi-platform games that are PS5 games. You understand what I'm saying? And those same multi-platform games can then be played on the ROG Ally or the Steam Deck. If their handheld does it at a lower end price, while still being pretty highly priced, you understand what I'm saying? But does it better than those two, then that's how they get into that market. Does that make any sense? Because like
I understand the words that you're saying, but
yeah.
But the problem still is if they're trying to make a portable PlayStation 5, they can't just be like they have to use the base PS5 specs. Like they can't just like undercut their own system and hope it's going to work that way.
Well, the portability is the added perk there. That's the reason why.
Added perk, but if you can't be like plays all your PlayStation 5 games as long as they're multi-platform. Like what I'm saying?
No. You misunderstood what I was saying.
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying, like you're like, well, there's multi-platform games that will run on these other systems, and
absolutely.
Fine,
you did not understand what I'm saying. You did not understand what I'm saying.
No, I did understand what you're saying.
Okay, well, what you just said back to me is not what I just said to you. So I don't understand how you think you understand what I'm saying.
I understood what you're saying, and I'm just kind of redirecting it back towards you. Like
I don't see sense.
I don't see how Sony can put out a portable system that's supposed to be PlayStation 5 like on the go, like kind of like their version of the Switch.
Yes.
But also have specs that are better than the other, but also not necessarily up to par with the PlayStation 5. Like that doesn't like I cannot imagine that they will release a handheld system that's supposed to play their PlayStation 5 games, but not meet the specs of their base system. That doesn't make any sense.
So here's the thing, right? Their base system is using a 4K TV. Their base system is built around 4K, and now with the PS5 Pro, 8K. That is what their base system is built around. These other two systems, by systems I mean handhelds, be it the ROG Ally or the Steam Deck, is 720p for the screen, or 800p for the screen, and 1080p for the screen. You put a 1080p screen in that, you use PSSR to do that sort of thing, to have that experience that you would get with a PS5 on a handheld, which they're definitely going to have to invest in PSSR in the future as well, which we'll get to that because that's the one news story I'm going to have, which is really funny. But you take that, right? You shrink it down into the handheld space. You take those 4K games, those games that are built for 4K, and you bring them down to the handheld space at 1080p. That's how you still have the quality of your PS5 games without having the same specs as a PS5 in the handheld, because you don't need the same specs if you're not running it at 4K. You don't need the same specs if your screen is not 4K. There's no one that's going to put out a 4K screen for a handheld because it's just stupid.
No, that is
if they put out a 1080p screen for said handheld, it's a smaller screen, there's smaller real estate, you're not going to really tell the difference because it is a handheld as opposed to a big 55-75 inch TV. And if you have the same quality of the games running at that 1080p screen, or maybe even using some PSSR to get it even down lower, but then scale it up to the 1080p screen, you can still have the same quality of the games from your PS5 without having the same specs as the PS5.
True, but some of those games will need retooling.
Why would they need retooling?
Why would they need retooling? Well, if they're not
Mhm.
built for that architecture, because if they're changing it, as you're saying, to run it with less specs, even despite the resolution, there is not always going to be a flawless experience. You could see this with obviously
I mean, the
somewhere like
handheld isn't made yet. We don't know how it would be built. And I mentioned PSSR, for instance, right? And PSSR is just a downscaler or an upscaler. Like it takes a lower end image and then upscales it to the screen. That is how you do that. That is how you get around that. You get around it via the AI upscaling technology that they've been investing in heavily over the last few years, and they just rolled out for the first time with PS5 Pro. That is how they do it without losing the actual quality of the game. However, by time that this sort of handheld gets out, I expect them to have iterated on PSSR in a way that it's essentially perfected, kind of like DLSS is right now, or FSR3 is, which is still a little shaky. But my point being, using upscaling technology, they'd be able to get to this point.
Yeah, but you still would probably likely need some optimization to it if the architecture is changing.
I mean, yeah, but again, we don't know what the architecture of said handheld will be. Like we don't understand that yet. We don't have those pieces to the puzzle yet. But like they do, and I'm sure if they're smart, they're building the architecture of the handheld around that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like they will take that into account.
But they'll also want to make something that's going to be, especially if their goal is to target PlayStation 5 games specifically. Yeah. They're gonna want something that's going to run into as few issues as possible.
Of course,
and you're right.
We're
just really speculating.
We're spitballing ideas. We're spitballing theories and that sort of thing right now. We are all fully in speculation. I'm just giving my thoughts on how they could use their new technology that they just put out to their benefit and keep the the specs lower and make it so it doesn't cost them as much to make the item and still have that same quality. And I do think that 1080p screen is a big way they can do that first and foremost, because there's no reason to have a 4K screen. There really isn't. There isn't. Like if you look at things like the ROG Ally that exists right now, that's a 1080p screen, and the 1080p screen that's 120 hertz. A lot of games can't even push it, even with like the highest end of high ROG Allies.
Yeah.
So that's why they'd have to build it around a 1080p screen. They'd have to build it around their upscaler technology. And if they did something like that, I do think they could keep the cost down while having the specs, or at least potentially having the specs appear like it's as high end as a PS5, if that makes sense. By using the upscaling technology, they'll be able to kind of hide some of the the flaws in the specs that are inside the handheld system itself, because it doesn't take a lot to upscale to a 1080p screen, whereas it takes a lot to upscale to a 4K screen, and that's the difference in technology right there.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you 100% on that thing. I just think that if they, maybe I should just make my kind of like final thought on this.
Yeah, sure, really. Absolutely.
And I think it's really, if they do not make this system seamless to every game that exists for PlayStation 5 right now, like if you own it and you can't play it, that like without fucking around with it, then this system is just dead in the water at go. Like they need to, if their goal is to make a portable PlayStation 5 experience, it needs to be as seamless as it is at home.
I agree. Yeah.
So they definitely have some work on
I do think if they were to go the route that I'm talking about, they'll just be doing what they've been doing for forever now, where they have the two options where it's like fidelity and performance mode. And the performance mode is your 60 FPS, whatever, using the scaling technology, and the fidelity mode is just the straight 1080p, no upscaling technology, just 30 FPS on your handheld. There you go. Which is similar to what you get with your PS5, but instead of 1080p, it would be 4K. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I do think that would be the route they'd end up taking. And since people have gotten so used to that sort of thing in every single game that releases, I think it's so uniform that would make the most sense for them.
Yeah. Although, honestly, I'm almost wondering at this point if they should just co-develop this with whatever they have coming next and just, keep that kind of thing.
We just heard about them already, like, working on a handheld, Yeah. So we know that the next PlayStation console isn't meant to be announced for 4 more years, essentially.
Yeah.
I think if we're hearing about a handheld that they're working on, the co-development might be with the Pro that they're currently developing. So them developing it alongside the Pro, which uses their upscaling technology for the first time, would be the smartest way to do it right now. Because no one's going to want a PS5 handheld when the PS6 exists. I think this
unless it's a PlayStation 6 handheld.
Yeah, that's true. I do think at most right now what you're looking at is that this handheld will release right around the time, like maybe a year or two before we jump into the next console space, be it the PS6, be it the Xbox, whatever, that sort of thing. And because of that, they'll also be able to keep costs down that way because they're already looking towards the future and the cost of the PS6. And as such, they'll already have the parts up for, because they kind of stock up on parts for like when the PS4 generation was about to head into PS5. They still released a shit ton of PS4s and they had the two generations overlapping each other. And they were able to cut down the cost of PS4s massively when they announced the new system, or when like people knew the new system was coming soon and that sort of deal. So like you give it like a year after before like the new PS6 comes out and you drop this handheld for people that want to play PS5 on the go, I think that is like the best course of action for that sort of deal. So like in 2027, for instance, the handheld releases and people know the PS6 is coming in 2028. This is to corner the handheld market that Steam and MSI and ROG and this, that, and the other have their hands in. And it's more of that and less of for people looking to buy a PS6, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
And because of that, since they're already working on the next console, they've got those other parts for the PS5 dirt cheap because they're going into the next generation. They're looking towards that, and the wholesale parts for their last generation is going to be sold at a lower end price. So they take those parts and they build their handheld system around it. That's my assumption on what's going to happen. That's the smartest thing from a business standpoint to happen, and it's the easiest way to continue to have people in your past ecosystem and bring them into your next ecosystem through, and also compete with people like Steam and ROG. I think it would be really smart to do that, but we all know that Sony's not very smart, so I don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big question. Like I said, it could be a really great thing. Like there's definitely a lot of I think there's
hell, I would probably buy a PS5 handheld. Like I'm gonna be honest, I'm out more than I am in.
Oh yeah.
So like I would definitely get a PS5 handheld. Like currently my Steam Deck is that more or less, but it's
and I think
that's a no-brainer
Steam Deck and the
for me.
Switch, definitely seen that consumers are interested
more
in
willing to move towards handheld systems. Yeah. Definitely.
But it'll be interesting. I almost think that they would benefit from like a Switch-esque mechanic to it, where you can, it can actually function as like a home PlayStation 5 as well if you have it plugged into the TV, and then it can draw on that a little bit more. But who knows? We're all just speculating. So
yep. And we talked a lot about PSSR in this last conversation we were having about the handheld. So now I want to talk about PSSR. It's actually quite funny. Yeah. So Silent Hill 2 remake has been having some issues on the PS5 Pro. And people were talking about how, hey, it's the first iteration of PSSR. They gotta work it out. And the Silent Hill devs put their head down and they went to the lab and they started fixing the implementation of PSSR in Silent Hill 2 for the PS5 Pro in performance mode, 60 FPS, that sort of thing. Because it was looking kind of grainy, it was looking kind of bad, and it wasn't a good iteration of PSSR. And then everyone praised them for how much they were able to, bring PSSR forward, and how they were able to work around it and do better after the first iteration. And people talked about how, hey, PSSR, it's a showstopper. We'll be able to do things like this and not really lose any quality. It's looking great. And this is the way that they fixed the PSSR problem. Do you want to guess the way they fixed the PSSR problem in Silent Hill 2 remake?
No, what they do?
They removed it.
Oh.
So all these people were praising them, and praising PSSR and with the new update and everything and how far it's already come. And then the devs kind of stepped down there like, yeah, actually we just removed PSSR. That shit sucks. That's essentially what happened. And it was so funny when people found that out. So that happened the other day. And on the flip side of that, and this is the reason why, you might be thinking, hey, we just had this whole little conversation where you said maybe they'll be able to use PSSR, but if they're already having trouble with the PS5 Pro and PSSR, it might not be as possible. And that's where I want to talk about this. We saw some of the implementations of PSSR on other games, such as Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 on the PS5. And they did a really good job of implementing it there, as well as, I believe, on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So it's kind of hit and miss right now, but it is the first iteration. And if upscalers have taught me anything, it's that the first iteration is going to be all over the place. So like when I first started using DLSS, or when I first used FSR for the first time, those motherfucking things were like very spotty, depending on what game you were playing, on how good they actually looked and how well they actually did. So if they are able to, enhance FSR technology over time, and make it better. I mean, FSR, sorry, here I am saying FSR. FSR needs help as well. But if they are able to enhance PSSR over time and make it better, I do think that is something that will be a game changer for Sony. But they really got to work on it, because right now it's all over the place on how good it works.
Okay. Yeah, and hopefully, in terms of the handheld, maybe by the time whatever years that is, hopefully they'll have something at least more reasonably worked out. So at least make it a little bit more functional, hopefully.
Yeah, it's not so much that it's not functional, right? That's not the problem. It's just that there's enough artifacting there from the upscaling tech that they haven't fully worked out all the kinks. Like, it works, right? But it doesn't look as good as it should, and as such, in some cases, it does look worse than just base PS5. And it is functioning, it just needs to be worked on right now. And I do think that what we have seen and what has worked well is a very big improvement in image quality and clarity over the PS5, but it's not working in every game, and as such, them kind of continuing to work on this, it's going to be a process. Like, I think that's my main takeaway. It's going to be a process. It'll take a little while for them to get it, but the baseline is there, and it is a good idea. They're just, they gotta take their time and work on it.
And they'll get there.
Yeah, I do think they'll get there, because I do think, like I said, baseline's there. They just got to work on it.
Yeah, it's still new.
So it's new tech. Yeah. Well, not necessarily new tech, but it is new tech for Sony.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Yeah, new for them.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's new console tech. Like, we haven't seen this in consoles yet.
No,
like,
true.
We've had FSR, right? And we've had, but that's like plastered over the game itself, essentially. Like, that's built into the games when they're played on console. It's not just something you could turn on and off. And that being something with the PS5 Pro, like, where it's new upscaling tech that's a blanket over the entire console and is in-house built alongside AMD and isn't something that's on the market on the PC, I do think that it will take a little bit. And here's the other thing. It is using the new AMD cards that are coming very soon to PC. So I do think once those cards get out on PC and people are able to look at that and adjust, like, the way the upscaling tech works and, like, get more hands-on with it on the PC side of things, that the drivers and whatnot and the actual technology will be able to be worked on better for the consoles. So I think once it gets out to mass market and isn't just a Sony PS5 Pro thing, that it will be something that is able to be improved upon.
Yeah. Yeah,
because like
definitely.
DLSS was improved upon once it left the 20 series cards and went to the 30 series cards, because more people bought 30 series cards, and then that caused a like shift in the market where more people were using DLSS and it was marketed more and this, that, and the other. And as such, they had an obligation to make it work better. And
Mhm.
so they started making it work better. Because like DLSS 1.0 is like dog shit. Like you look at that and you look at like where we're at now with DLSS, and it's a night and day difference. And I do think that they'll probably be able to pull that off with PSSR in the future as well.
I think they'll get there, and it's going to be very. I think in the future, it's going to be a very useful tech to have, especially as we see kind of more stuff moving into, AI and everything as well.
I agree.
So, yeah, that's interesting though. The thing we were just saying about Silent Hill.
Yeah. So like, here's the other thing, right? Because I've used upscaling tech for a long time on PC because I kind of like got in on the ground floor. I saw how DLSS 1.0 was as opposed to what we have now, with like frame gen and this, that, and the other. I do think there is a potential issue for upscaling tech on console, and I don't have a PS5 Pro, so I can't really tell you if that is an issue that I could notice. But when it comes to upscaling tech on PC, there is latency that is added in with this upscaling tech, with this frame generation, with this, that, and the other. And that latency on top of already using a controller, which controllers, as you may know, have a lot of latency. So like when you press a button compared to the button actually responding to what you just did, depending on the frame rate of the game and whatnot, there is more latency with a console than there is with PC. And that depends on your specs as well. But a lot of consoles are lower end and whatnot. Not everyone has a PS5 Pro or Xbox Series X. And because of that, and because of like the fact that you are using a wireless controller there, and you are using a controller as opposed to something that is just, instantly used, there is latency when it comes to games on controller. And I am kind of fearful of taking that latency from already using a controller and then adding on top of it the latency that is added with upscalers. And then if they do go into frame gen in the future with consoles, adding the latency that is used from frame gen as well. When you add all three of those on top of each other, I do feel like that could be a potential problem, and that could drag the actual gameplay feel of games in the future down. And that is something that will definitely need to be hammered out with also using upscaling tech on consoles in the future.
It's interesting that I've not thought about that before, but it makes total sense. So, because you think about it, even just your TV could just throw off some of that latency.
Exactly.
So, yeah, no, that makes sense. Just any little kind of bump in the road, especially like you're saying. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure they probably have some guidelines.
I'm sure they have something in mind for a way to kind of offset that.
Yeah.
Because I'm I don't work on consoles. I don't exactly know how to offset that, but I'm sure people are working on solutions to that. But it is just something to keep in mind because it is a thing that exists. Yeah. And as such, with them going into like upscaling technology now, you got to think about like this is going to change game feel potentially. So people may like the way a game feels more on like an older console compared to a newer console, and that may change like the actual what's like that may change the industry as a whole, like because when you are using these things, it's not so much the picture quality that's a problem that I have when it comes to gaming. It's how a game feels like, and it doesn't matter because I'm not watching a movie, I'm playing a game, I'm interacting with it. You are going to notice those sort of things because you have to interact with a game to play it. So yeah, it's something they're going to have to think about. And I really hope that, like I said, I haven't got the experience PSSR yet, but I really hope there is something in place there to kind of offset that latency problem that could be brought about by upscaling technology.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I've never thought about it before, but it makes total sense. So, yeah, and I'm curious if anything's really been affected by it yet. I'm sure there's probably some kind of thoughts out there. Let me see. PSSR and latency.
Yeah, that's a good thing to look up. I never even thought about that. Let me just. Yeah, all I'm seeing is stuff from like 8 months ago.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's anything recent.
I don't think enough people have looked at it. Like, I do know that Digital Foundry is looking at PSSR right now and doing a lot of different videos on it. But the thing with Digital Foundry is, and I love Digital Foundry, like, I think they do a wonderful job with their like tech analysis. But they do have this really big problem where they focus on the image quality over how a video game actually feels a lot of the time. At the end of the day, I'm playing a game. I'm not just looking at it. And I do think that that is something that they need to also focus on in order to, kind of you get that idea out there. So maybe like if there is some latency problem, someone can give these console manufacturers and other people a nice kick in the ass so that they can start working on that,
Yeah. The only one I can see so far is it doesn't have to do with that. So, yeah, it probably just need more people with hands-on time. So.
Yeah, I think as more people get something like a PS5 Pro, or as more games have elements that the PS5 Pro has, not more games, but more systems have elements that a PS5 Pro has, such as this upscaling tech. That's where you will see more people start commenting on it.
Yeah,
and we're just not there yet. And it's just a time game right now, essentially.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to see what happens. Like, legitimately, I am very excited to see where this next generation of gaming goes.
Yeah, it should be very interesting. So we'll see. It's still kind of at the beginnings now, but I'm starting to see some of that framework. It'll be interesting. I think, Nintendo, I think depending on what they end up doing, is kind of gonna at least get some thoughts more on that kind of stuff too. So
yep.
Once someone makes their first move, it just kind of starts to snowball from there. So.
Yeah, and I mean, Sony has done it now. I do think that either FSR or DLSS will be used with the next Nintendo handheld. I'm kind of excited to see what happens there, because it is a handheld. Like, that is how the Switch was, and that is supposedly how the next Nintendo system is going to be as well. Yeah. And I can't really see them going back to like a general normalized like home console as opposed to a hybrid or just a handheld. And because of that, and because of Nintendo being like the console manufacturer right now that is the furthest away in game quality. And when I say quality, I mean performance quality, not the games that they put out. I do think it'll be interesting to see how upscaling tech for a Nintendo console will work. Because right now, Nintendo consoles are the furthest away from a stable frame rate. It's just as simple as that. The Switch is very unstable. It has been for the last like 2.5, 3 years, because it's at the end of its lifespan, and it started showing its weaknesses way sooner than a normal console. And I think it'll be interesting to see how Nintendo kind of combats that and stops that from happening for the next Nintendo console, if they can do something like that.
Yeah, but one of the rumors has been there's going to be an upscaler, so we'll see.
Yep, that's it. I'm good. I don't think I have anything else to say about that. I think I've said enough, and it was quite a lot.
Okay. Ready to wrap up then?
Yes.
Okay. Well then, thank you everyone for listening to us tonight. Don't forget to find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, Amazon, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to find all of them, are on game-crunch.com. And if you want to send us an email, you can reach out to us at gamecrunchcast@gmail.com. Brandon?
Yes?
Any final thoughts?
No. I think I've said enough. I think I've done enough yapping now.
All right. Well, that's it. My name is Mike Anastasia. You can find me online. I'm Clash of Penguin there, or on your favorite gaming console. Until next week, game on.
Game on.
Glitching pixels on the screen, dreaming of a world unseen. In the chaos I am keen, game on to the final scene. Mystic forest neon lights, epic battles every night. Leveling up takes all my might, power up, I'm in the fight. Game crunch taking over, every move feeling bolder. Step aside on the controller. Pixelated dragon soar. Heroes knocking on the door. Open portals to explore. Questing, always wanting more. Game crunch taking over. Every move feeling bolder. Step aside, I'm a soldier. Game on, I'm the controller. Boss fights turn the tide of war. Hidden treasures to restore. Triumph echoes to the core. In this world I'm wanting more. Boss fights turn the tide of war. Hidden treasures to restore. Triumph echoes to the core. In this world I'm wanting more.
There she is.
I think that was a good episode.
Yeah, we had a lot more to talk about than I thought we did. So,
Yep.
Yeah. All right. On that note. I
Yeah,
gotta
me
eat.
too.
Mhm.
I need to eat as well. So talk to you later.
All right, see you, man. Have a good night.
Good night.